Babysitter's nightmare. I had babysat for the Campbells twice before, and nothing about the house had struck me as strange, at least, not until that night. It was a big house, with gleaming wood floors and the faint scent of lavender in every room. Mr. and Mrs. Campbell were warm, if not a little overly concerned about their 6-year-old son, Tommy. The kid was sweet but quiet, the kind of boy who'd rather draw in his sketchpad than watch cartoons. "Thanks for coming, Emma," Mrs. Campbell said as she adjusted her earrings in the hallway mirror. "We shouldn't be out too late. Tommy's already eaten, and he's usually asleep by 9. Just let him watch a little TV before bed." "Got it," I said, pulling out my phone to set a reminder for 9. Babysitting was easy money, especially with a kid like Tommy. All I had to do was make sure he didn't set the house on fire, and I'd walk out with $50. They left a few minutes later, and the house felt unnervingly quiet. Tommy was in the living room, lying on his stomach with his sketchpad, a box of crayons scattered around him. He barely looked up when I walked in. "Whatcha drawing?" I asked, sitting on the couch. He held up the paper. It was a crude drawing of a stick figure standing in front of a house. A big, round moon hung in the sky, and a smaller stick figure stood in the window of the house. "Is that me?" I asked, pointing to the stick figure in the window. Tommy nodded but didn't say a word. The kid was shy, sure, but there was something about his silence that felt off. I shrugged it off and grabbed the remote. "Okay, buddy. A little TV before bed. How about cartoons?" Tommy didn't answer, just turned back to his drawing. I flipped through the channels until I found something bright and animated, then settled into the couch. The first hour passed uneventfully. I glanced at my phone occasionally, scrolling through Instagram and replying to a few texts from my friend, Megan. Then, at 8:15, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. "Nice choice on the cartoons." I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen. My first thought was that Megan was playing some kind of prank. She was always pulling stuff like that. I typed back. "Very funny. Who is this?" The response came almost immediately. "You should really check on Tommy." I glanced up from my phone. Tommy was still on the floor with his crayons, completely absorbed in his drawing. Slowly, I stood up and walked over to him. "Hey, Tommy. Everything okay?" He nodded without looking at me. My phone buzzed again. "He's so quiet, isn't he?" A chill ran down my spine. I spun around, scanning the room. The curtains were drawn, and every door was closed. The Campbells had a security system. I'd watched Mrs. Campbell set it before they left. No one could have gotten inside. Could they? I texted back. "Seriously, who is this? Stop messing with me." Again, the reply came instantly. "I'm not messing with you, Emma. Check the kitchen." I'll admit, my first instinct was to grab Tommy and run. But something about the message felt compelling. Like I had to obey. I told myself it was just Megan trying to freak me out. She must have guessed where I was babysitting. Leaving Tommy on the floor, I crept toward the kitchen. The lights were off, but the faint glow of the moon through the window cast long shadows across the countertops. Everything looked normal. I was about to turn back when my phone buzzed again. The fridge. I turned, my heart pounding. Slowly, I opened the fridge door. Inside, everything was in its place: milk, eggs, leftover pasta in a Tupperware container. But there, in the middle of the top shelf, was something that didn't belong. A single crayon. Red. My stomach turned. I grabbed the crayon and slammed the fridge door shut. My phone buzzed again. You should put that back. What the hell? I whispered. My hands were trembling as I typed. How do you know what I'm doing? The response made my blood run cold. Because I'm here. I backed out of the kitchen, clutching the crayon like it was some kind of weapon. Tommy was still in the living room, now drawing furiously on his sketch pad. I went to him, crouching down to meet his eyes. Tommy, are you playing a prank on me? He finally looked up, his big brown eyes wide with confusion. Then he shook his head. Did you put this in the fridge? I held up the crayon. He shook his head again. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Tommy, where's your parents' landline? He pointed to the phone on the kitchen wall. I grabbed it and dialed 911, my fingers shaking so badly I almost dropped the receiver. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. Someone's in the house, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know where, but they're watching me. They've been texting me. The operator's tone sharpened. Are you in a safe location? No, I said, glancing back at Tommy. It's just me and the boy I'm babysitting. Please, hurry. Units are on their way. Stay on the line. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, my breath catching in my throat. You shouldn't have done that, Emma. The line went dead. I dropped the phone, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. Tommy was staring at me now, his expression unreadable. I wanted to scream at him to talk, to say something, anything. But I couldn't risk scaring him more than he already was. Tommy, listen to me, I said, my voice trembling. We're going to wait here until the police arrive, okay? Just stay close to me. He nodded, moving to sit on the couch next to me. I kept my eyes on the hallway, every creak of the house setting my nerves on edge. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly dropped it. They won't find me. Tears stung my eyes as I typed back. What do you want? Who are you? The reply was instant. I want to play. The room felt like it was closing in around me. The shadows seemed darker, the air heavier. I turned to Tommy, who was clutching his sketchpad like a lifeline. Tommy, I said gently, have you ever heard of someone playing games like this? Someone texting your mom or dad? He shook his head but didn't look up. Instead, he handed me the sketchpad. My stomach dropped as I stared at the drawing he'd just finished. It was a picture of the living room. The couch, the TV, the coffee table. And behind the couch, a tall, dark figure with red eyes. I swallowed hard and spun around, looking behind the couch. Nothing. No shadowy figure, no glowing red eyes. But that didn't stop the cold chill crawling up my spine. My phone buzzed again. With shaking hands, I lifted it to my face. Getting warmer. I clutched Tommy's sketchpad, flipping through the pages frantically. Each drawing seemed innocuous at first, but as I looked closer, details leapt out at me. Stick figures with wide, hollow eyes. Dark shapes looming over smaller figures. And in every single drawing, the moon. Full, round, watching. Tommy watched me silently, his small hands clasped in his lap. Who taught you to draw like this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. No one, he murmured, barely audible. It was the first time I'd heard him speak all night. Tommy, I pressed, who's the man in your drawings? The one with the red eyes? He stared at me for a long moment, his lips quivering. Then, finally, he whispered, he said not to tell. The room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. The weight of Tommy's words pressed on me like a lead blanket. I took a shaky breath, gripping his sketchpad like a lifeline. "Tommy," I said softly, kneeling in front of him. "Listen to me. I need to know who he is. Is he in the house?" Tommy shook his head slowly, his wide brown eyes glistening with tears. "Not yet." My stomach turned. "What do you mean, not yet?" He clamped his hands over his ears and shook his head harder. "He's mad at you. You shouldn't have called the police." The words sent ice through my veins. My phone buzzed again. "Good boy, Tommy. Tell her to listen." The text was a gut punch. It wasn't just random, whoever was doing this knew what was happening in real time. My pulse thundered in my ears as I looked around the room, half expecting to see a face pressed against the window or a shadow darting across the wall. But the house was still. Too still. The sound of the front door rattling broke the silence, and I almost screamed. Instead, I grabbed Tommy and backed us both into the corner of the living room, my heart in my throat. "Emma," a voice called. "It's Officer Davis with the North Ridge Police Department." Relief crashed over me like a wave. I jumped to my feet, practically dragging Tommy with me as I bolted to the door. I yanked it open to find a uniformed officer standing on the porch, his flashlight cutting through the dark. "Thank God," I choked out, tears streaming down my face. "There's something, in the house. They've been texting me, watching me. You have to help us." Officer Davis's face hardened, and he stepped inside, his hand on the holster at his hip. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice firm. "Lock the door behind me and don't open it until I come back." I hesitated, clutching Tommy close. "But..." "Do it," he snapped, already moving toward the kitchen with his flashlight sweeping the shadows. I obeyed, locking the door and pulling Tommy to the couch. He was trembling now, and his silence was no longer unnerving, it was heartbreaking. I hugged him tight, whispering, "It's okay. He's going to find whoever's doing this. We'll be safe soon." Tommy didn't respond, and I noticed he was staring at something across the room. I followed his gaze to the window. The curtains were drawn, but the faint outline of the moon was visible through the fabric. A soft hum filled the air, low and melodic, like the sound of a lullaby played underwater. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Tommy nodded, his face pale. My phone buzzed again, and I almost dropped it. With trembling hands, I unlocked the screen. "He's here." The hum grew louder, vibrating in my skull. Tommy began to cry, the sound raw and panicked. The overhead lights flickered, casting the room into a strobe-like chaos. I clutched Tommy tighter, my eyes darting toward the hallway where Officer Davis had disappeared. "Officer Davis!" I screamed. "Are you there? Please." No answer. The hum stopped abruptly, leaving an almost deafening silence in its wake. Then, from the direction of the kitchen, came the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps. "Emma," a voice called. It was deep and distorted, like it was coming from underwater. It wasn't Officer Davis. I froze, holding Tommy so tightly that he whimpered. My phone buzzed again. "Don't move." I didn't. I couldn't. The footsteps grew louder, closer. A shadow stretched across the hallway floor, impossibly tall and warped, like it didn't belong to a human figure. "Tommy," the voice crooned, sickly sweet. "You've been such a good boy." "No," Tommy whimpered, burying his face in my chest. "No, no, no." The shadow grew, spilling into the living room. My phone buzzed one more time. "Now run." The lights went out. The lights flickered back on, but the oppressive silence remained, thick and suffocating. My heart pounded as I clutched Tommy, desperate to shield him from whatever horror was lurking in the shadows. "Emma," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't. "I've got you." The hallway leading to the kitchen was empty now, the tall shadow gone, but the tension in the air remained. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. "Did you run far enough?" The words made my blood run cold. Run where? The police were supposed to be here. Where was Officer Davis? I glanced back at Tommy, whose pale face reflected my own terror. His sketchpad lay open beside him, revealing another drawing. This time, it was unmistakable. Two figures, one small and one larger, stood on the front porch, red eyes watching them from inside the house. The front door rattled. I screamed and pulled Tommy close. A loud pounding echoed through the room, followed by a voice I recognized. "Emma, open up. It's Officer Davis." Relief flooded my chest. I ran to the door, nearly tripping over my own feet, and unlocked it. The officer stood on the porch, his face tight with urgency. "We need to get out of here," he said. "Now." "What's going on?" I stammered, grabbing Tommy's hand. "There's no time. Just move." We followed him into the night, the chill air biting at my skin. The police cruiser sat at the curb, its lights flashing like a beacon of safety. "Get in the car," Davis ordered. I hesitated, glancing back at the house. It loomed in the darkness, the windows like hollow eyes. Something about it felt wrong, like it was watching us leave. "Emma!" Davis barked, snapping me out of my trance. I climbed into the car, pulling Tommy onto my lap. The officer slammed the door shut and got into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life. "We'll be safe now," I whispered to Tommy, though I wasn't sure I believed it. The cruiser sped down the street, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror. But the relief I expected didn't come. Instead, a nagging doubt began to creep in. "Officer Davis," I said hesitantly, "what did you find in the house?" He didn't answer. I leaned forward. "Officer?" He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his face unreadable. "I told you, Emma. There's no time to explain." His tone sent a shiver down my spine. Something was wrong. "Where are the other officers?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You said backup was on the way." "They're delayed," he said, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. The cruiser turned into a dark, empty road, the houses and streetlights disappearing behind us. My unease grew with every passing second. "Where are we going?" I demanded. "To a safe place," he said curtly. Tommy whimpered, burying his face in my shoulder. I looked down at him, then back at Davis. "You're scaring him. Please, just tell us what's going on." Davis's jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. But then he said, "The man you're afraid of? He's not in the house anymore." The words sent a chill through my entire body. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He glanced at me again, his eyes dark and hollow. "He's with us." The car swerved suddenly, and I screamed as the cruiser skidded to a stop on the side of the road. Davis turned around in his seat, his face twisted into something unrecognizable. "It's you he wants, Emma," he said, his voice low and menacing. Tommy clung to me, his small body trembling. "Officer Davis, please." "I'm not Davis," he snarled. The air in the car grew heavy, suffocating. The overhead light flickered, casting eerie shadows across his face. His eyes gleamed unnaturally, red and glowing, just like in Tommy's drawings. "Run," Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't need to be told twice. I shoved the door open and bolted, dragging Tommy with me into the darkness. The sound of the engine roared behind us, followed by the crunch of gravel as the cruiser lurched forward. Into the trees. I gasped, pulling Tommy toward the woods that lined the road. We plunged into the undergrowth, branches scratching at my arms and face. The headlights of the cruiser swept through the trees, illuminating the narrow path ahead. "Emma," the voice called, no longer resembling Davis's. It was deeper, distorted, and filled with malice. "Keep running," I urged Tommy, even as my legs burned and my breath came in ragged gasps. The headlights disappeared, plunging us into darkness. I slowed, listening for the sound of footsteps or an engine, but all I could hear was my own pounding heart. "Emma," Tommy whispered, tugging on my sleeve. "What is it?" I asked, crouching beside him. He pointed to something ahead. Through the trees, I could see a faint glow. A house. "Let's go," I said, pulling him toward the light. As we approached, the house came into view. It was small and old, with peeling paint and a sagging roof. But the windows were lit, and I could hear the faint hum of a TV inside. I knocked on the door, my fists trembling. "Please," I called. "We need help." The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her 60s. Her kind, weathered face was lined with concern. "What's going on?" she asked. "Someone's after us," I said, glancing over my shoulder. "Please, can we come in?" She hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let us in. The warmth of the house was a stark contrast to the chill outside. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching Tommy tightly. "You're safe now," the woman said, closing the door behind us. But as she turned to face me, I saw her eyes. They were red. Tommy's words hit me like a gut punch. "He said not to tell," the boy repeated, his small voice trembling. "Tommy," I said as calmly as I could, kneeling down to look him in the eyes. "Who is he? Is he someone you know? Does he live here?" Tommy's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked away, clutching his sketchpad so tightly his knuckles turned white. The silence was unbearable. "Tommy, please." The sound of footsteps upstairs cut me off. Heavy, deliberate steps. My body froze, and every hair on my neck stood on end. Someone was upstairs. The footsteps stopped abruptly, followed by an eerie creak of the floorboards above us. "Stay here," I whispered to Tommy, my voice barely audible. He clung to my arm, his wide eyes pleading with me not to go. But I couldn't sit and do nothing. The police were on their way, but there was no telling how long they'd take to arrive. Whoever, or whatever, was in the house, I had to keep Tommy safe. I grabbed a heavy fireplace poker from the hearth and crept toward the staircase, each step feeling like it echoed through the entire house. The air grew colder as I climbed, the hallway upstairs shrouded in darkness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stopped, my hand trembling as I pulled it out. "You're getting closer." The text sent a jolt of panic through me, but I gritted my teeth and continued. I pushed open the first door at the top of the stairs. It was the Campbell's bedroom, neatly made and completely empty. The next door led to a bathroom, equally devoid of life. Only one door remained. Tommy's bedroom. I approached it slowly, my grip on the fireplace poker tightening. The door was slightly ajar, and a sliver of moonlight spilled into the hallway. I nudged it open with my foot, my heart racing. The room was exactly as I'd seen it earlier, a twin bed with a dinosaur blanket, shelves lined with toys, and a nightlight casting a soft glow on the walls. But something was wrong. The closet door was open. I distinctly remembered closing it when I'd tucked Tommy in during my first babysitting job. The Campbells had even mentioned he didn't like sleeping with the closet open. I took a deep breath, raising the poker. With a quick motion, I yanked the closet door wide open. Empty. Relief washed over me for a brief moment, until my phone buzzed again. Behind you. I spun around, swinging the poker wildly, but the room was empty. My chest heaved as I tried to steady my breathing. Emma? Tommy's voice called from downstairs. I bolted back down the stairs, clutching the poker like a lifeline. Tommy was still sitting on the couch, his face pale and tear-streaked. I told you to stay put, I said, rushing to his side. He didn't respond. Instead, he pointed to the window. I turned to look. There, pressed against the glass, was a face. Pale, gaunt, and framed by stringy black hair. Two glowing red eyes stared into the room, unblinking. I screamed, grabbing Tommy and pulling him away from the window. The face vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving nothing but the faint reflection of the room in the glass. My phone buzzed again. You can't run. Before I could react, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Tommy clung to me, his small body trembling. He's here, he whispered. Who is he, Tommy? I demanded, shaking him lightly. You have to tell me. Tears streamed down his face as he finally broke. He's the man from the moon, he sobbed. He talks to me in my dreams. He told me he'd come for you. The sound of footsteps echoed again, this time coming from the living room. But we were in the living room. I gripped the poker tightly, backing us into a corner. The sound grew louder, heavier, until it stopped just a few feet away. Tommy, a deep, guttural voice growled, filling the room. The boy whimpered, burying his face in my shoulder. Leave us alone. I shouted into the darkness. The voice chuckled, low and menacing. You invited me, Emma. You opened the door. My mind raced. The fridge. The crayon. The texts. I had followed every instruction, unknowingly playing into its hands. Let us go, I pleaded. He's just a child. The voice didn't answer. Instead, the air grew colder, and a figure began to materialize in the center of the room. Tall, impossibly thin, and shrouded in darkness, its glowing red eyes were the only thing clearly visible. Tommy screamed, his cries muffled against my shoulder. You can't stop me, the figure hissed. The boy belongs to me. No. I screamed, stepping in front of Tommy and brandishing the poker. You can't have him. The figure tilted its head, as if amused. Brave, but foolish. It lunged forward, and I swung the poker with all my strength. The metal passed through it like smoke, and I stumbled, nearly falling. A blinding light flooded the room, and the sound of sirens pierced the air. The figure recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. No, it growled, its voice full of rage. The front door burst open, and two police officers stormed in, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The figure let out a guttural roar before dissolving into nothingness, leaving only the faint scent of sulfur behind. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching Tommy as the officers rushed to our side. It's okay, one of them said, his voice soothing. You're safe now. But as I looked into Tommy's tear-streaked face, I knew the truth. We weren't safe. Not really. As I sat with Tommy in the eerie stillness of the Campbells' living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. Even after the police had left, convinced there was no one else in the house, the unsettling events lingered like a shadow in my mind. The text stopped, the house grew quiet, and for a moment, it felt like we might finally be safe. But Tommy's drawings haunted me, each one a chilling reminder of the figure that seemed to loom over our lives that night. The Campbells returned hours later, finding us sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket of silence. I didn't tell them everything, how could I? I only told them enough to explain why the police had been called. But as I left that house for the last time, I couldn't bring myself to look back. Weeks later, when I scrolled through the local news, I read about the Campbells moving out abruptly. Unexplained disturbances, the article said, though no further details were given. The final twist came in the form of an anonymous text I received not long after. "See you soon, Emma." And just like that, I knew the nightmare was far from over.